He lives in a big, noisy and crowded city with a busy rhythm of life. But he is interested in another world. A world with no fuss, where a person lives preserving the heritage of his ancestors and the precepts of nature. Konstantin Kuksin, an ethnographer, traveler, a current member of the Russian Geographical Society, as well as the founder and director of the Museum of Nomadic Culture in Moscow. Nomads of the Great Steppe are his favorite topic, and he can talk about it for hours.
Про кочевую цивилизацию.
About the nomadic civilization that, like a patchwork quilt, covers our planet. We will talk about all of this on the sacred land of Ulitau. Welcome to Ulitau. Konstantin Kuksin in the new season of Dala project. The sun of Ulitau, bright and magnificent, shines on the people of this land, and the light spreads over the surface of the lake like molten metal. Indeed, the dawn of human civilization began with the development of metallurgy, and by civilization we mean the emergence of cities, industrial development, and space exploration. Because culture emerged the moment the human being separated himself from nature. Today we will talk about the dawn of civilization with Zaypin Kazanbayeva, director of an amazing museum, the Museum of Mining and Smelting History. Zaypin, tell us when, in what era, did people master the ore deposits and begin to work with metal in the land of Ulitau?
According to the research of Alkey Margulan, the people of the Ulitau-Zhezkazgan region mastered copper production by the beginning of the Bronze Age. This is one of the oldest areas that did so. Traces of about 400 objects associated with ancient metallurgy were found in the valleys of the Zhezda and Kengir rivers. These are furnaces, mines, smelting workshops. According to scientists, more than 1 million tons of ore were mined in the Bronze Age, and 10,000 tons of copper was obtained in its pure form. Thanks to the research of generations of scientists, it was proved that Sararka was inhabited since ancient times, and this territory was used for various purposes, including metallurgical. Archaeologist Kaныsh Satpayev, over the course of his geological research, which began in the mid-20s of the last century, found a huge number of ancient mine workings. Some of them even had traces of ancient miners, some tools, some remnants of mined ore. It's quite possible that a tragedy broke out and the arch of an ancient mine, a horizontal one, collapsed and crushed a miner. So Satpayev found dozens and hundreds of such ancient mine workings, namely in central Kazakhstan. In 1946, when academic Margulan started the Central Kazakhstan Archaeological Expedition and began a systematic study of the territory, numerous settlements of the Bronze Age, located in riverbeds, near springs, in very convenient geographical points with comfortable landscapes, were put on the archaeological map of Kazakhstan. The Taldysai settlement was discovered by accident. In 1992, a river changed course because its former course was overgrown with shrubs. And during the next spring flood, the river eroded the upper layers of the settlement and fragments of ceramics and ore appeared on the surface. And it became clear that there once was a settlement with a metallurgical specialization. We can say what kind of materials the settlement worked with and that it operated practically throughout the entire second millennium BC. Metallurgy back in the day was the main occupation of the local tribes. This is proven by fairy tales, legends, and myths. Metal has always been a sign of wealth. It was believed that the people who own it are all-powerful. If we talk about the legends associated with the underworld, we also have legends about the mistress of the underground mountain. This is the Snake Princess. She guards the ore treasures. By the way, science has already proven that there are a lot of snakes in copper deposits because the temperature there is higher than in other places. The legends of our people are very similar. For example, in the Kazakh fairy tale Yırtostik, the main character, before coming of age, goes through an initiation rite. He descends into the underworld to overcome obstacles. He says, "Unfortunately, my father settled in Sorquduk and gave his child to be tormented by evil spirits." Sorquduk is the name of one of the ancient centers of metallurgy in the vicinity of Jizkazgan. In general, the word Jiez is an ancient name for copper, and the presence of such toponyms as the river Бізді or the town of Jizkazgan suggests that ore mining and metal smelting were mastered here many centuries ago.
When we were in your wonderful museum, it was night. The fire was burning. Your employees showed us how ore is smelted and how the ancient smelters worked. Aydar, the process happening behind our backs belongs to what century approximately? Our time machine took us back how many thousands of years? It took us to the 3rd or 2nd millennium BC. Now you can see how ancient people worked. They took the ore, grinded it, put it in a crucible, and using surface furnaces, smelted the copper. So that's where it all starts, from stone hammers that crush copper ore. When examining this area, the researchers found cattle bones, a piece of ore, bone products, special vessels. Before getting to the smelting of copper, the smelters performed a ritual. They were considered as a separate caste, and people were afraid of them. This greenish stone in my hands. Can you imagine what objects can be made from the metal obtained from it? It's magic. What furnaces did the ancient smelters have? Tell us about the evolution of the smelting.
The smelting took place in several stages, starting from primary melting to the stage of finished non-ferrous metals. There were also intermediate products such as matte. Several types of furnaces were used, mostly ground ones. This suggests a very high quality of ores smelted. These are azurite, malachite, and chrysocolla. It was processed in ground-type furnaces, in small reverberatory furnaces. A melting bowl with ore crushed to a powder was placed inside the furnace with low melting materials. The smelting of ore took place in these furnaces with the help of forced blast, for which the smelters used bellows.
It is difficult for a modern person to imagine that such amazingly beautiful stones as malachite or lapis lazuli were thrown into furnaces to obtain copper. Although, on the other hand, if there is a need to make a weapon or a tool, then even precious stones would probably be melted.
As the rich ore reserves were depleted and the share of metal in it decreased, people started using furnaces of a more complex design. At the Taldasai settlement of ancient metallurgists, archaeologists discovered shaft-type furnaces, which were high-tech for that time. And this indicates that the demand for metal in the late Bronze Age greatly increased.
Өте үлкен болғандығын және өте көп көлемде металл балқытылғандығын дәлелдейді осы пештерде. Бұл өте күрделі пештер.
In the second millennium BC, the ores were gradually depleted. Their segmentation zones reached up to 30 meters deep, and beyond that, the oxidizing zone ended. Deeper than that were sulfide ores with chalcopyrite, chalcocite. Multi-component sulfide ores required slightly different furnace designs. Sulfur had to be removed, and then pyrite had to be removed. A shaft-type furnace is a pit that goes a couple of meters deep into the ground, with long horizontal chimneys. These chimneys were necessary to provide a natural air supply that was needed to create draft, which would remove sulfur dioxide and burnt fuel in general. At the same time, the chimney helped warming up the house. We can say that the invention of shaft-type furnaces belongs to the metallurgists of this region, because shaft-type furnaces have not yet been discovered in other regions of Eurasia.
I want to tell you about an experiment conducted in the Taldasai settlement. Igor Rusanov came here to conduct an experiment under the guidance of Antonina Yermolaeva. To the west of the main settlement, we used a piece of land to build a replica of the shaft-type furnace that we found in Taldasai. It was about 2 meters deep, with a chimney about 13 meters long. We dug a hole underneath, and we built canals from 3 sides down there. So a pit with 3 canals. We covered the surface of the canals with clay and ash. These canals are needed to install 3 bellows on 3 sides. But we did not use the bellows right away. First, we had to conduct an experiment to see exactly how many degrees this furnace heats up to on its own, whether it can theoretically melt ores. Yes, melt copper. We stoked. We also threw in there some dry dung fuel. I myself used dung fuel on expeditions. If you blow it, it gives quite a lot of heat, and nomads have been using it for thousands of years. Here we tried the same thing. We let the fire just burn without blowing, and we didn't use any forges. The heat reached 1600 degrees, and copper smelts at 1200. If an ordinary fire heats up to 1000 degrees, then a furnace may very well reach 1600. This furnace took 3 days to cool down, and then we made a small furnace, maybe 1.5 meters deep, with only 1 canal. It heated up to 1300 degrees. So, enough to melt copper anyway. Today, when they are building a metallurgical plant, they always take into account what the wives, sisters, mothers of miners and smelters will be doing. Did they do the same back in the day? What did the wives of ancient miners do?
During excavations on the territory where Milukuduk settlement was once located, later on in Taldasai as well, archaeologists found pottery. Along with this, they found such artifacts as woolen clothes and yarn.
This means that people in ancient Ulitau not only smelted ore and obtained high-quality metal, but also developed other areas of human economic activity.
Our museum exhibits artifacts found in central Kazakhstan. This is a whole series of the most magnificent knives, sickles, arrowheads, and each of them has versions made of metal and versions made of bone. Some of these products may have been used as horse harness, while some as decorations or jewelry. Some of this jewelry, which we call sculptural jewelry, is dedicated to the gods. Women made pottery. And since women were taken from a different tribe so that there was no mixing of blood, this woman brought the innovations of making ceramics from outside. Looking at what additives were added to the ceramic dough, looking at the very method and technology of making these vessels, one can draw very interesting and far-reaching historical conclusions. We should consider the Bronze Age comprehensively. First of all, this is a dwelling, this is a construction, this is the architecture of the Bronze Age. This is the ability to build communication. The space near the furnace is filled with a bunch of ceremonial accessories for rituals that took place right next to the furnace.
The only question is, where do the ideas for technologies come from? First of all, this is a loom device, a thread, the craft of spinning. How did they dye the fabric? Did they use herbs? This is about technologies, how chemical reactions of dyeing were possible in the conditions of the steppe.
The local produced wool and reproved it. This does not mean that everything was made here. It doesn't happen like that. There was a wonderful communication when people took something and used it, adapting to local realities. The Andronova fabrics, dyed red, are present across the Urals and Siberia. I believe that the Bronze Age has three pillars: the craft of metal, the craft of ceramics, and the craft of weaving. It was a very harmonious world. They lived inseparable from nature, where the top was the top, the middle was the middle world. The headdress and shoes represented heaven and earth, and the dress was an intermediary. This is harmony within nature, human lives as part of this universe.
The wheel of time is spinning, and along with this, the human civilization is developing. In the 20th, 21st centuries, humanity has made a breakthrough. We have mastered atomic and nuclear energy, we use plastic, more and more new technologies are being developed. But we still live in the age of metal. The nuclear age and the age of plastic have not yet fully arrived. The most important, critical parts of all mechanisms are still made of metal. How rich is the Ulitau land in copper today?
Kaныш Satpayev, a pioneer who discovered the potential of the polymetallic ores of Jezqazgan and Ulutau and presented them to the whole world, once said that Jezqazgan is the pearl of Kazakhstan.
Қазақстанның інжу маржаны дейді. Елуінші, алпысыншы жылдары геологтар
In the 1950s and 60s, geologists who conducted exploration and analysis of the ore here discovered that 1 pud of Jezqazgan ore contains 2 pounds of copper.
таза мыс бар дейді. Бір пұт кеніміз
1 pud is 16 kilograms, while 2 pounds is 1 kilogram.
2 фунт 1 килограмм, 2 фунтымыз 500 грамм.
That is, the proportion of copper in this ore is quite high.
16 килограммнан 1 килограмм таза мыс шығу деген сөз.
Нет, наверное,
There probably isn't a Russian person who doesn't know Bajov's fairy tales and the mistress of the Copper Mountain character. Although she looks beautiful in our tales, while in the legends of the Turkic peoples and the peoples of the far north who traded with and brought metal from the Turkic peoples, she is an old woman. For example, in the legend of the Nenets, this is the Copper Old Woman. Using these legends, we anthropologists can establish trade routes, because the Nenets and their southern neighbors, the Hanti, got metal from here.
қола металдардың ішінде
Copper melts quite easily and combines with other metals, such as tin and lead, very well.
қорғасын байланыс
In addition, an alloy of copper and bronze looks very beautiful and resembles gold.
өте әдемі металл болып табылады. Міне
Importantly, this metal is easy enough to handle during the casting process in the manufacture of various items.
басқа да заттарды
As studies show, the products of the Bronze Age were brought to the neighboring states, for example Russia, as well as countries located to the east from outside.
мемлекеттерде, яғни орыс мемлекетінде
Yes, they had metallurgy back then, but it is important to note that it appeared a lot later.
олардың да өздерінің металлургия
In one of his scientific works, Alkay Margulan mentions the Sarisu Tract, also called the Copper Way.
жол осы орталық
This path starts from central Kazakhstan, and then, according to Margulan's assumption, it went towards the west and east. Unfortunately, scientists are yet to study this topic seriously, which is why, from the point of view of science, the existence of the Copper Way remains a question.
негізі болашақтың ісі
если мы посмотрим знаменитую
The famous tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the emperor of the Qin dynasty and the founder of the Chinese state, had the famous terracotta army.
китайского государства,
They were all armed only with bronze weapons.
были только
At that time, all this technology, including the technology for making chariots, came to China from here.
Китай в то время
We always say the Chinese silk, the Great Silk Road, and so on. But in fact, in those days the road went the opposite way, from us to them.
от нас к ним. Когда я только
When I was just getting into history a long time ago, it was a revelation to me that one of the oldest metal forges was located in Altai, and not somewhere in Europe or in Sumer.
сейчас
But now I know that in the territory of central Kazakhstan of Ulutau, there are probably smelting furnaces and mines older than anywhere in the territory of the former Soviet Union, and probably one of the oldest in Eurasia.
в Евразии